22. Goldberg versus Chris Jericho.
Quite frankly, man, it's good to see you again, old buddy. Old pal.
April of 2003. Goldberg had just joined WWE, and he's already put to the test. After one of Jericho's matches, Goldberg apparently made fun of his in-ring work. When Jericho learned of this, he was furious as the two had been bitter rivals since their WCW days. When the two met backstage, their argument escalated so much that Goldberg grabbed Jericho by the throat. But Y2J wasn't going to hold back either. Despite being relatively smaller in size, he pushed Goldberg to the ground and put him in a chokehold. The situation got so tense that several backstage wrestlers had to pull them away. Years after the incident, Goldberg openly admitted that Jericho kicked his ass, which isn't a common admission from the man who was unbeatable. That night, the tale of the invincible Goldberg was buried in a hallway, courtesy of Chris Jericho. It serves as proof that sometimes the smaller guy can still take the show, and it's beautiful when they do. 21. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels.
All you want, what you've got to do is beat me, which you cannot do.
Before the June 9th, 1997 installment of Raw even began, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels got into a really heated exchange backstage. The reason? Bret found that Shawn was making some pretty blatant comments about his private life. Shawn accused him of having an affair with the blonde bombshell Sunny, when in reality he was the one being romantic with her. The argument soon turned into full-blown fists. Bret later claimed that Shawn threw the first punch at him, but missed, and the excellence of execution drilled him clean in the jaw. Then came the moment people still discuss in hushed tones. Hart grabbed a handful of Shawn's hair, ripped out a huge clump, and left Shawn with an actual bald patch. The altercation was so intense that several wrestlers had to band together to separate them. Bret downplayed the incident afterwards, calling it just a minor fight, but people who witnessed it claim it was far filthier than he claims. The aftermath was just as awkward. Michaels stormed out of the building, threatening to quit WWF for good, while Bret stayed behind like nothing ever happened. 20. Curt Hennig versus Brock Lesnar.
I'm the guy who took down Brock Lesnar at 35,000 feet.
The plane ride from hell took place on May 5th, 2002. The same day, WWE's European tour concluded with Insurrection. The flight home from the UK was already delayed by an hour, which gave wrestlers plenty of time to engage in excessive drinking. This resulted in complete chaos at 30,000 feet above sea level. The main event, Curt Hennig versus Brock Lesnar. Hennig was playing harmless shaving cream pranks when things escalated into an all-out aisle brawl. Matt Hardy, a witness to the ordeal, remembers Lesnar picked him up like he was driving him in the turnbuckle and slammed him into the emergency door. They almost burst open the emergency exit while in flight. Things got so out of control that Fit Finlay and Paul Heyman had to physically separate everyone before someone got hurt. The aftermath was brutal. Hennig's final WWE match would come 2 days later on May 7th against Matt Hardy, a bitter, chaotic ending to his legendary career. 19. Batista versus Booker T. May 2006, Encino, California. During what was supposed to be a quick SummerSlam commercial shoot, things got out of hand. Batista and Booker T, two of WWE's best talents, let months of frustration come to a boil. So what happened? Based on Booker's statements later, he was calling out Batista for acting obnoxious and disrespectful to his fellow employees. Things got heated fast, and somewhere between words being exchanged, punches were thrown. Those that witnessed it would describe it as a brutal, bloody, vicious fight that lasted for about several minutes. Batista came out of it with cuts on his face, while Booker was left with a black eye that showed up on SmackDown the next week. And yeah, many eyewitnesses claim it was Booker who dominated. WWE did not levy major punishments for the fight. Some took it as a release of pent-up frustration, while others just shook their heads in disbelief. Regardless, both men were fine. Batista went on to become a multiple-time World Heavyweight Champion, while Booker took his place in the WWE Hall of Fame. 18. Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon.
This crowd is living.
The most documented backstage fight in wrestling history took place seconds after the Montreal Screwjob. Bret Hart was not going to walk away quietly after being screwed out of his WWF Championship in his home country. Here's what went down. Hart spat in Vince McMahon's face, smashed some TV equipment, and tossed a perfect uppercut right in front of Gerald Briscoe, Pat Patterson, and Shane McMahon. Vince loves to claim that he offered Bret a free shot, but Hart says that's total garbage. He later acknowledged that it was one punch, and it was a good punch, and Vince was just really egging him on. The legendary part? Cameras that were filming Bret's documentary, Wrestling with Shadows, captured the lead-in and fallout, giving fans never-before-seen access to wrestling behind the scenes. While the punch itself was not filmed, Hart's reaction and the chaos that followed were all recorded. This was more than an altercation, it was the dramatic closing scene to wrestling's most infamous double cross. 17. Big Show versus the Great Khali.
I wonder what's going through Show's mind at this point in the match.
In the mid-2000s, WWE experienced a unique occurrence with rare giant heat when the Big Show came to blows with the Great Khali backstage. It wasn't simply another match where wrestlers' egos collided, but instead, it was a fight fueled by pride from two actual giants. The tension had been building for some time, mainly because Khali used Big Show's signature corner chop despite the Big Show specifically requesting him to stop. So what was the final straw? A match in Puerto Rico where Khali's corner chop in front of the Big Show was enough for him to finally snap. Backstage, words were exchanged, and then eventually fists. People who witnessed the fight have described the scene as pure pandemonium, with two men well over 7 feet exchanging punches that had the crew feeling like they were in some sort of live-action movie. Chris Jericho even pointed out Khali took the Big Show's first punch and returned a few of his own before the fight could be separated. This proves one thing: whenever there's a fight, Chris Jericho is always around. 16. Joey Styles versus JBL.
I've got an ongoing lecture about the differences in professional wrestling and sports entertainment.
Late December 2008, somewhere over the Iraqi desert, WWE's Tribute to the Troops flight turned quite unexpectedly into the most unique boxing ring ever. For days, JBL had been acting like a bully, belittling and insulting Joey Styles, the soft-spoken voice of ECW, in front of the entire talent roster. Mistake number 1. JBL must have forgotten that Joey had called hours and hours of ECW's blood-soaked wars live from ringside, and saw more barbed wire and chair shots than any wrestler had sustained in their entire career. During mid-flight, after JBL spouted yet one more insult, Styles snapped. He got up, planted both feet, and threw one straight right hand that knocked JBL out instantly. Passengers said it was the loudest pop on the plane. And no, it wasn't that the plane just hit turbulence. JBL appeared on Raw a few days later with a mysterious black eye and cut that WWE makeup team had to scramble to cover up. The best part, for once in his life, John Bradshaw Layfield was silent. 15. Mr. Kennedy and Randy Orton.
A back suplex.
Let me talk about a fight that didn't even take a punch to finish a man's career. May 25th, 2009, Mr. Kennedy was just drafted back to Raw, pumped with promos and hype built up to make his big return. But instead of returning to superstar status, Kennedy received the execution date to end his career. In the first match back, Kennedy executed a belly-to-back suplex on Randy Orton. It was a completely normal move, except for the fact that Orton claimed that it almost spiked him on his neck. If you are going to really upset someone in 2009 WWE, you do not want to do it to the Viper. Enter the no-fist brawl. Kennedy had sensed that Orton was going off cold all night, and the second that they hit the curtain, Randy exploded. There were no punches thrown and no chairs swung at each other, only venom. Orton chewed out Kennedy in front of the boys, and then he walked straight to management with an ultimatum. I am not working with him again. 4 days later, on May 29th, WWE released Kennedy quietly. 14. Chris Jericho versus Brock Lesnar.
Lesnar toying with Randy Orton. I didn't think I'd ever be saying that in this match, but here comes up.
SummerSlam 2016 wasn't just the matches in the ring, it was a backstage circus. Brock Lesnar actually busted Randy Orton open with some real elbows, leaving the Viper concussed and bleeding everywhere. Chris Jericho, being the lifeguard of the locker room, went storming to the producer Michael Hayes backstage asking, "Was that supposed to happen?" Hayes gave him nothing, so Jericho let loose some choice words. Perfect timing. Brock walked through the curtain right then. What happened next? Chaos. Depending on who tells it, Brock either called Jericho names or just told him to shut up, and before long, the two were face to face. Then there was Brock's infamous ultimatum: hit me or kiss me, bitch. Then came Triple H and Vince McMahon, who ultimately had to break them up. McMahon later told Jericho that the blood was planned all along. You see, the lesson was learned. In WWE, even standing up for your fellow wrestler can earn you a threat. 13. Sin Cara vs. Simon Gotch. July 19th, 2016 was the night when WWE brought back the brand split, and with it, SmackDown Live. Many under-the-radar talents knew they had to tune into the draft in Worcester, Massachusetts. But the real story was not on camera. It was in the catering area. While wrestlers and crew members assembled for the show, Sin Cara and Simon Gotch decided to write their own story. These two gentlemen had some bad blood brewing for months at this point. Gotch had a reputation for being a larger talker than his push, and Sin Cara was not interested. It is not clear what exactly happened, but some accounts claim he punched Simon Gotch, while others say he launched an unopened can of soda directly into Gotch's face. Regardless, what ensued was not a 5-star classic. It was a quick and one-sided destruction, with Sin Cara firmly in control throughout the incident. Gotch ended up sporting a black eye and was nowhere to be found on live events ever since. Sin Cara, meanwhile, continued on without punishment. 12. Matt Riddle vs. Goldberg. One of the funniest passive-aggressive locker room incidents in WWE history happened at SummerSlam 2019. For months, Matt Riddle had been trolling Goldberg online, calling him the worst wrestler in the business after that infamous Super Showdown match with The Undertaker, so it was just natural for Goldberg to block him like an offended teenager. Fast forward to Toronto, and Destiny put the two in the same area backstage. Goldberg accidentally shoulder-checked Riddle, then blurted out the most sarcastic apology ever. "I didn't mean to run into you. We've got to talk." Riddle, in full goofy mode, kept calling him bro until Goldberg eventually snapped and said the legendary line, "I'm not your bro." Later, Shane McMahon told Riddle that he was literally one bro away from getting hands from a 52-year-old part-timer. But in my opinion, Goldberg should have been the one afraid, as Matt Riddle is a legit MMA fighter with some matches in the UFC. He's also that guy who actually defeated the MMA GOAT, John Jones, not once, but twice during high school wrestling.
Against WWE star Matt Riddle, who won both their matches.
I bet you didn't know that. 11. Becky Lynch vs. Charlotte Flair. The WWE Draft 2021 gave us one of the most expensive games of hot potato ever and nearly ended a friendship. The plan seemed simple enough. Flip the women's titles to their new brands. Becky Lynch was going to take the Raw Championship, call herself Becky Two Belts, and eventually give the SmackDown title to Charlotte Flair. Charlotte voiced her displeasure of using the words swap, change, or switch, but was told to suck it up. When showtime came, Flair didn't calmly hand over the belt. She ripped it away and threw it on the mat like a toddler throwing a tantrum. Backstage, words were exchanged, but thankfully nothing physical occurred. Things escalated when Charlotte walked out of the gorilla position without speaking to Vince McMahon and exited the arena altogether. She immediately got on a flight to Orlando to be with her then boyfriend Andrade, who left no one guessing about his feelings and tweeted "F WWE." 10. Sin Cara vs. Chris Jericho. What happens when two of the biggest troublemakers in WWE come face to face? Absolute circus. So, in November 2016, during a boring bus ride from Leeds to Glasgow for an event, Sin Cara took it upon himself to become the onboard entertainment. His entertainment was loud and obnoxious, and even a broken car engine would have sounded pleasant in comparison. A handful of wrestlers asked him to stop, but he dismissed every warning and continued. Eventually, Chris Jericho had enough. Playing the part of the adult in the room, he confronted Sin Cara and told him to stop before the wrestlers made him stop. Sin Cara's only response was a hissy, "F off." What happened next was absurdity. Sin Cara threw a punch, and Jericho responded by biting his finger in the most unorthodox way ever. Yes, a WWE legend biting a finger in the middle of a bus. The aftermath was quick. Sin Cara was tossed off the bus and ordered into anger management, while Jericho used the strange story as comedy fodder on Raw. 9. Buff Bagwell vs. Shane Helms. What happens when an inflated ego collides with someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect? You get Buff Bagwell versus Shane Helms. The story goes down in 2001, right after WWE's WCW buyout, when Bagwell was already making waves backstage for all the wrong reasons. During a heated exchange, Bagwell crossed a line when he mocked Hurricane, saying he was too small and didn't have a good physique. That was it. Helms, who was hardly the most terrifying guy in the locker room, didn't waste time on words. He instead reached for the nearest weapon, a water bottle, and cracked Bagwell in the head with it. The stunned Bagwell barely had time to recover before Helms followed up with a clean punch that dropped him cold. In an instant, the WCW veteran was humiliated by a cruiserweight, and the locker room was almost entirely on Helms' side. 8. Perry Saturn versus the Rookie.
Wow! You don't want to make Perry Saturn on his noggin!
May 17th, 2001, WWE Metal provided a match that should have been an easy squash match, but instead a wrestling massacre ensued. Perry Saturn was supposed to successfully showcase his skills with a quick, controlled victory over fellow enhancement talent Mike Mad Dog Bell. After Bell botched a snapmare arm drag, Saturn ended up landing on his head. It is here that everything went awry. Saturn lost all composure. What started as a scripted match turned into complete unhinged violence, as he began to do some real damage to Bell while knocking him senseless, finishing the match by throwing him out of the ring. Bell ended up as a legitimate concussion, having gotten slammed headfirst out of the ring, and it was obvious to everyone backstage that Saturn was gone. The aftermath. WWE moved forward as if Saturn's snaps were a regular occurrence, all the while giving him stupid storylines, one of which featured him falling in love with a mop. It was WWE's strangest way to punish him. 7. Undertaker versus Kurt Angle. Wrestling's most loyal enforcer provided a definition for on-site justice. At 30,000 feet, The Undertaker was peacefully taking a snooze in first class when all hell broke loose between Vince McMahon and Kurt Angle, who were playfully wrestling on the way home. Apparently, Vince thought it would be great to try and take down an Olympic gold medalist on a plane. Soon after, Taker woke up as his dead man instincts kicked in. Without further questions, he wrapped his arms around Angle's neck and choked him out cold. Yup, completely lifeless, in the middle of a flight. Only after Angle hit the floor did someone take the time to explain that it was just friendly wrestling between Vince and Kurt. Years later, Undertaker recalled this story on Stone Cold's Broken Skull sessions with a smirk on his face, like there was nothing unusual about putting a gold medalist to sleep mid-flight. Angle also appeared on the same podcast and admitted that he was put to sleep, but he has nothing but respect for the dead man. 6. Dynamite Kid versus Jacques Roujo. The coldest act of revenge in wrestling did not happen in the ring. It happened in the locker room in the late 1980s. It all started with some ripped up gear. Curt Hennig had played a prank by cutting up the duo, the British Bulldog's gear. However, Dynamite Kid wrongly believed Jacques Roujo was the perpetrator, and anyone who has ever been falsely accused of something knows revenge is a dish best served brutal. A week later, Jacques was waiting outside the cafeteria, and his brother Raymond Roujo was watching over him. No one knew that Dynamite was going to show up. When he did so by himself, Jacques sprang into action and hit Dynamite with a roll of quarters in his fist. 4 teeth shattered. His face ballooned instantly. Bruce Pritchard later recalled the aftermath of the punch to be a faucet of blood, and Raymond would not let anyone help Dynamite until Pat Patterson stepped in. It is a story that illustrates how sometimes the greatest wrestling stories and moments happen behind the scenes, when miscommunication, grudges, and perfect timing come together. 5. Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle. 2 wrestling superstars turned from friends to foes in a single backstage altercation. In 2004 on SmackDown, when Team Angle attacked Eddie and Chavo Guerrero in the ring, the spot didn't go well. Kurt Angle thought Eddie took too long to get to the ring, while Eddie thought Kurt was too stiff in the ring. The argument backstage escalated. Eddie accused Kurt of doing unnecessary damage, while Kurt accused Eddie of messing up. Verbal attacks continued until Eddie said that Kurt didn't know how to work safely anymore. That was it for Kurt. Eddie attempted a double leg takedown, but Kurt's Olympic instincts kicked in. He countered, got Eddie in a front face lock, and started to choke him out for real. Eddie was getting red as Kurt held the grip tight and demonstrated exactly why he was an Olympic gold medalist. It was finally over when the Big Show stepped in. At 500 pounds, he literally lifted Kurt off Eddie to break it up. 4. Del Rio versus social media staffer. On August 7th, 2014, WWE's cafeteria became the epicenter for one of the most career-altering slaps in wrestling history. WWE's social media manager Cody Barbieri made a racist joke about Alberto Del Rio, allegedly saying it's Del Rio's job to clean dishes because he is Mexican. Whoops. As expected, Del Rio did not appreciate the joke. He immediately confronted Barbieri, demanding an apology, but the social media manager just smiled. That's when Del Rio slapped Barbieri so hard he ended up on the ground. Apparently, Mexico's greatest export also offered a hands-on customer service policy. So what happened next? WWE fired Del Rio for unprofessional conduct, and he became the first WWE wrestler to be released for standing against racism. Barbieri remained on for 4 more years until he quietly parted ways, showing that karma may be slow but never misses. 3. Sin Cara vs. Sheamus. Sin Cara's time with WWE could easily be framed as backstage brawls the greatest hits. From scraps with Simon Gotch to that incident with Chris Jericho, Sin Cara was basically able to host his own fight club behind the curtain. But his most controversial moment has to be the supposed fight with Sheamus in May 2014. Conan on MLW Radio swore up and down that Sin Cara actually put a beating on the Celtic Warrior and that Sheamus tried to play it off. Sheamus himself was also quick to clarify on Twitter that the incident never took place. And Sin Cara? He dismissed it all as just a little misunderstanding here and there. A little scuffle. So what to believe? Well, when you have a guy who collected backstage fights like Pokemon cards and even went to anger management classes, you do have to wonder if there has to be something to it. 2. Haku vs. Brutus Beefcake. And so one day during the 1980s, Brutus the Barber Beefcake committed the cardinal sin. He complained to the management that Haku was hitting him too hard in their matches. When Haku got wind of the complaint, he acted not so calmly. He busted into the locker room, found Beefcake in the shower naked, and pulled him 3 or 4 inches off the ground with one hand, by the throat. Just imagine a 300-pound warrior from Tonga choking out a soaked, naked man who was probably thinking to himself, "How did I get here?" The other boys froze, too scared to intervene. Thankfully, Hulk Hogan stepped in to calm things down. Haku's message for Beefcake was clear. If you can't take a chop, you're in the wrong business. The entire story was told decades later by Haku's son, Tonga Kid, who's also a part of WWE now. 1. Arn Anderson vs. Psycho Sid. October 27th, 1993, the UK hosted perhaps the most intense backstage brawl in wrestling history. It began as a heated argument in a bar. Sid Vicious had insulted Ric Flair, and Arn Anderson had had enough of it. Both men retreated to their hotel rooms as if to cool things off, but Sid was not yet done with his rage. Later that night, he returned to Arn's room for part 2. What ensued spilled into the hotel hallway and became an uninvited weapons match. Witnesses like Too Cold Scorpio recalled pure chaos. Both men covered in blood, Sid holding Arn by the hair, stabbing him with scissors every which way. When the violence subsided, Arn had been stabbed more than 20 times, and Sid had been stabbed about 4. The hallway looked like an actual crime scene with blood all over it. In the aftermath, Sid was fired, Anderson suspended, but they later made peace before Sid's death in 2024. Sometimes defending a friend's honor in the wrestling world means spilling a wee bit of blood and having a story that will live in locker room infamy forever.